This is going to be my practice guide for the 2016-2017 TMEA All-State 5A-6A Euphonium Etude number 1. Before I begin this video, I just want to elaborate on something that maybe some people aren't understanding in my other practice guide videos. And that is, this is simply how I teach. I've got a few comments that people said, well, what you're saying or how you're playing it is not precisely how my teacher or my band director are playing or telling me to play this etude. And I just want to address that and say, music is not a science, it is an art. And there are many different interpretations to playing the same music. When I create these videos on how I teach these etudes, this is coming from my personal experience and my personal interpretation of how to perform these etudes and the success that I've had with my students in this methodology. So if you choose to play them differently, that is perfectly fine. Or if you have a band director or another teacher that tells you to do things a little bit differently, that is also fine. There is not necessarily a right or wrong way to do this. There might be ways that are more correct or less correct, but music is a very personal art form, and it is really important that you make these etudes your own, but in a informed and well thought out way. So with that, let's get on to my practice guide for Etude 1 for the 2016-2017 Euphonium All-State. I divide this etude up into 4 sections, and the first section I'm going to talk about will be measures 1 to the downbeat of measure 16. This section of the piece functions as the exposition and introduces all of the rhythmic, melodic, and stylistic elements that we will incorporate into the rest of the piece. This piece is marked Allegro, which means fast. The recommended tempo of this is anywhere between 108 and 120 beats a minute. I found that many students, especially my more advanced students, are wanting to play this piece as fast as 132. I recommend keeping this more in an Allegro style, an Allegro tempo, than going much faster than 132 if that's something that you can do. The faster this piece goes, it tends to lose its style as a march and become more of a gallop, and we definitely want to keep the piece more of a march. This piece is not very difficult from a technical standpoint, which is why it is important for advanced players to make sure that they are playing every element of this piece very, very precise, especially articulations, styles, and dynamics. So with that, I will go ahead and play the first section and talk about the things that you need to be careful of in this section to establish especially rhythmical integrity. Alright, so in that selection, I hope you heard that I was really going out of my way to make a difference between the triplets and the dotted 8/16 notes, and the 16th notes especially, making them shorter than the triplets. Dynamically, this piece offers some difficult passages for maybe a younger or more inexperienced player. We have both fortissimo and pianissimo dynamics. As I like to tell my students, fortissimo means as loud as you can play with a good sound, and pianissimo is exactly the opposite, as soft as you can play with a good sound, with the key being a good sound. You don't want to play too soft in the pianissimo triplet sections where we lose good tone, articulation, or end up having to change style. So we always want to have a good airflow and think about tone as our number 1 priority. I would also like to address breathing. Breathing in this etude is very crucial. I'm attempting to mainly do about 4 bar of phrases in breathing where it is appropriate. In etude playing and solo playing, it is okay to occasionally breathe on the bar line. I know many times band directors in ensemble settings will tell us don't breathe on a bar line or to avoid breathing on a bar line. However, when you're by yourself and playing soloistically, sometimes breathing on a bar line is appropriate, especially if it is the end of a phrase. I always try to make sure that I breathe after longer value notes, because when you breathe, you have to take time away from the note that comes before the breath to fit in the breath and play the next note in time. So breathing after half notes or quarter notes is much more advantageous than breathing in the middle of eighth notes or triplets. So that is my thoughts on the first section. So let's go ahead and move on to the second section, which gives us a little bit more dynamic contrast, especially because we have a diminuendo leading into piano. So after recording that portion of the piece, I realized that there was a couple of things that I left out that I would like to talk about. Number one would be the breathing in measures 18 and 20. We have eighth rests before the quarter note pickups to the next bar, which are either a minor seventh or an octave. Make sure that you breathe in the rest and not in the large interval. I've had many students come in lessons preparing this piece and have breathed simply because they're shifting their embouchure, which they shouldn't be doing, by the way. But because of the large interval leaps, they're wanting to breathe at that point to kind of give them a little bit of relief, and you can't. You need to breathe in the quarter rest. Also, in measure 22, there is a grace note, and it is important that this grace note sound like a grace note and not a mistake. It lays on the horn pretty well, A flat to G flat. It's a very easy valve combination. If you play it too fast or too slow, it can almost sound like an error. You want to try to find that balance between it being too fast and having enough length that it's very obvious to any listener that it is an ornamentation and not a mistake. We also have a series of 3 declamatory statements of dotted eighths, sixteenths, which in the past have always been the fortissimo resonantly sections. It happens twice in this section. The third time is a surprise and is marked with a piano. So make sure that you play that with a piano. Some people are overlooking that and playing the third one as loud, and this occurs in measure 28, beat 4. Make sure that stays piano. That phrase kind of ends with a little bit of a dynamic surprise. People are expecting the same rhythmical idea and melody to occur at the same dynamic as the previous two, and it doesn't. Making sure that is piano will demonstrate that you have studied the piece and have prepared it well. So now, let's move on to part 3. Alright, so moving on to section 3, I'm going to be referring to the pickups to measure 33 all the way to the downbeat of measure 52. For many students, this will probably be the most difficult section to perform. It is the part of the piece that goes the highest, all the way up to a high G flat. Also has a number of different accidentals that many young players might not be familiar with. So please make sure to study those and know what their enharmonic equivalents are. For example, in measure 41, we have an F flat, which of course is enharmonically the same as E natural. That same idea occurs later in the piece in measure 47. Something else to pay attention to is the repetitive nature of this section. For a number of measures, I believe it is between measures 40 and 40, and the downbeat of 46, we essentially repeat the same idea from measure 46 all the way to 52. So once you master those 6 bars or so, you can pretty much play 12. So this is where being a smart practicer is important, and watching out for patterns. So making sure that one session sounds exactly like the other. In fact, the dynamics are the same, the style markings are the same, everything is the same. It is essentially a repeat that is written out. So practice smart. Practice the first part of that section and then apply it to the second part. So here we go. Let's play the third cut of this etude. Okay, so as you can see, I've changed scenery, and it's because when I recorded this section of instruction in the practice room today, apparently my audio settings on my camera malfunctioned or got changed in some way, so pretty much it was muted. So I'm having to record this. So in case you're wondering why I'm here and not in the practice room, that's why I only discovered it in editing. So anyway, the last section, or cut 4 of the etude, is a very large decrescendo. You start piano and it decrescendos to a pianissimo, which has a diminuendo poco e poco, or little by little, and then it has a morendo, which means to die away. It has the same Latin root word mortis, which means death. So like mortician or mortal, or other words that would have the same root. So to die away. Now a decrescendo typically in most circumstances means to get softer. However, in this section, because it's so long, you don't want to think about it as getting softer as much as it is start louder. Piano is a very soft dynamic, and in order for you to project and to demonstrate that you can get softer, you have to have somewhere to go. So make sure that your starting point dynamically is maybe a little bit more robust and big compared to many other pianos that you may play. And so it just gives you the ability to get softer and still have somewhere to go with a good sound to the end. So with that, here's the last section of the piece, and if you have any questions over this practice guide, please let me know, and I hope if you've gotten this far that it has helped you in some way. So thanks for watching, and let me know what you think.